A Time of Discovery and Rediscovery by Nancy Day. Italy had awakened from a 1,000-year slumber, or so it seemed to the 15th century Italians. They felt that the 5th century sacking of Rome by invading tribes was the bitter pill that had put the world to sleep. They began to call the centuries that followed the Dark Ages. The time period in which they lived was the Renaissance, or rebirth. Was their comparison fair? Historians disagree. What is clear is that the Renaissance was a remarkable time of discovery and rediscovery that changed the world. Here's Italy. In 1347, a merchant ship sailed from Crimea on the Black Sea to Sicily. Here's Sicily right here. On board were rats infested with fleas that carried a disease called the plague. Soon after, the plague swept through Italy and the rest of Europe. It killed more than 1/3 of the population. Cities shrank, production slowed, and prices dropped. Rather than give in to low grain prices, Italians switched to more profitable products such as wine, oil, and cheese. As wool exports fell, they turned to silk. Gradually, Italy began to specialize in luxuries such as artistic metalwork, fine leather, and beautiful furniture. The northern Italian city-states, including Venice, Milan, and Florence, prospered. So did the papal states of central Italy and the kingdoms of Naples and Sicily to the south. Money brought education to the privileged few. That means only to the people with money. Learning had previously focused on religious studies. It expanded to include grammar, rhetoric, history, poetry, and moral philosophy. Wealthy Italians thought that these subjects would lead to a greater understanding of human nature and give them an advantage in business. Renaissance Italians turned to ancient Rome as a model for great civilization. Lawyers studied Roman law. Others discovered the joy of reading classical books. They became interested in poetry, history, and philosophy. Before long, scholars were rediscovering Greek and Roman art, science, and literature. In the Middle Ages, the Church had taught people to think about the afterlife. But during the Renaissance, people wanted to enjoy life on earth. Enthusiasm for games, sports, and entertainment blossomed. Music flourished. So they were more concerned with focusing on things that happened in this world rather than after they died. Individual expression and accomplishment became important. The 14th century Italian poet and scholar Petrarch spent countless hours studying ancient texts. He left a detailed record of his thoughts and activities. The idea was to be well-rounded. A Renaissance man was supposed to be skilled in all the arts and sciences. A perfect example was Leonardo da Vinci. He was a painter, sculptor, architect, musician, engineer, and scientist. Wow, very well-rounded. Interest in humanity brought realism to art. The great sculptor Donatello, while working on a particularly lifelike work, was heard saying to the stone, "Speak then, why will you not speak?" Painters drew everyday people in natural settings and faces that showed each individual's personality and emotions. So Donatello thought that his sculpture looked so much like a person that he said, "Why don't you talk?" Art stimulated interest in anatomy, study of the body, mathematics, and even physics, like force and motion. Leonardo's famous flying machine, for example, was designed to make a decorative angel flap its wings when pulled through the streets during Carnival. Leonardo also studied anatomy by dissecting human bodies. This enabled him to draw detailed studies of human figures. The Renaissance achievement that had the greatest effect on the modern world was the printing press. It was invented by a German craftsman named Johann Gutenberg around 1455. The press revolutionized education and standardized language. Revolutionize means made a really big change. Before the printing press, books were reproduced by hand. As a result, few were readily available, and they were very expensive. With the invention of printing, the number of books in circulation increased. The cost of a book decreased. As more and more people bought books, the ideas of the Renaissance spread quickly. So because of the printing press, that's this machine right here, instead of writing all the words in a book with a pen, people could just stamp them here and make books really quickly. So since they could make books more quickly, they were cheaper and they made more, and people could read more and people could learn more about all these ideas that people like Leonardo da Vinci and Donatello had. So it allowed the ideas of the Renaissance to spread. Kind of cool. Italy was located in the heart of the greatest trading area of the time. It became the center not only of trade but also of art, culture, and ideas. By the end of the 15th century, the Renaissance had spread to Germany. From there, it spread to France, England, and Spain. Not everyone experienced a Renaissance. Most women had few liberties. A 14th century merchant expressed the common attitude towards the female gender. If you have women in your house, keep them shut up as much as possible and return home very often and keep them in fear and trembling. It's not very nice. Laborers, servants, tradesmen, and apprentices also had very little say in the rules that controlled their lives. In addition, they were poor and illiterate. Illiterate means they couldn't read or write. As the decades passed, the artistic, cultural, scientific, and intellectual achievements of the period between 1350 and 1550 gradually affected all levels of society. So not just the rich people, everyone. For scholars, philosophers, and artists of the time, the Renaissance led Western civilization from the Middle Ages to modern times.